She circled me like a shark evaluating its next meal, her perfectly manicured fingers reaching out to adjust my collar. "Honey," she said in that sugar-sweet voice that made my teeth hurt, "maybe you should change your shirt. That one is a little casual." This was the 5th time she'd commented on my outfit. The 5th time. I was wearing a button-down shirt and slacks. We were setting up for a party, not attending a state dinner. But in Sophia's world, appearances weren't just important, they were currency. And apparently I was running a deficit. "What's wrong with this shirt?" I asked, genuinely curious about what fashion crime I committed this time. She tilted her head, doing that thing where she pretended to think really hard about how to phrase her criticism without sounding like a total nightmare. "It's just, well, Jessica's friends are going to be here, and some of them are very successful people, and I just want us to look like we belong, you know?" Ah, yes, the classic "we need to look like we belong" speech. Translation: "You're embarrassing me, and I need you to pretend to be someone you're not so my friends don't realize I'm married down." I'd heard this speech so many times I could recite it backwards in 3 languages. I looked at her. This woman I'd married 3 years ago. The one who used to laugh at my jokes and didn't care that I drove a used Honda instead of a BMW. Somewhere along the way, she'd transformed into this person who measured her worth by the number of designer labels in her closet and the square footage of her friends' vacation homes. It was like watching someone slowly get brainwashed by a cult, except the cult wore Chanel and drank overpriced green juice. "Don't worry, honey," I said, flashing her my best customer service smile. "I left my circus act at home." She laughed, but it was that polite laugh people do when they're not sure if you're joking or being passive-aggressive. Spoiler alert, it was definitely the latter. The irony of the whole situation wasn't lost on me. Here I was being told not to embarrass her when I was the one with an actual job that required showing up before noon. I worked in project management for a tech company. Nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills and didn't require me to post motivational quotes on LinkedIn every 5 minutes. Sophia, on the other hand, had what she called a lifestyle brand, which, as far as I could tell, meant she took pictures of her avocado toast and occasionally got free products from companies desperate for influencer exposure. But sure, I was the one who needed to step up his game. As the evening approached and the first guests started arriving, I found myself playing the role I perfected over the past year, the agreeable husband. I shook hands with men who talked about their stock portfolios like they were discussing military strategies. I nodded along while women explained their complicated skincare routines that required products with names I couldn't pronounce. I laughed at jokes that weren't funny and pretended to care about vacation stories from places I'd never be able to afford. This was my life now. And somewhere deep down, I knew something had to give. But standing there, watching Sophia float through the crowd like she was born for this shallow existence, I had no idea that the something that was about to give would be my entire marriage. I had no idea that in a few short hours, she would decide to turn our relationship into entertainment for her bougie friends. I had no idea that this night, this ridiculous Friday night party, would be the beginning of the end. All I knew was that my feet hurt, my fake smile was getting harder to maintain, and I desperately needed a drink that wasn't from the guest-only wine selection. Little did I know, Sophia was about to perform her own circus act, and I had a front row seat to the greatest show of disrespect I'd ever witnessed. But hey, at least my shirt looked good. You know that moment when you accidentally stumble into information that fundamentally changes your entire perception of reality? Yeah, I was about to have one of those.
I'd been tasked with bringing extra wine glasses from the storage closet to the kitchen because apparently Jessica's 30 guests each needed approximately 4 different glass types for their various alcoholic preferences. God forbid someone had to drink Pinot Grigio from the same glass they used for Sauvignon Blanc. The horror, the absolute travesty. Someone call the Geneva Convention. I was walking down the hallway, arms full of stemware that cost more than my car payment when I heard it. Laughter. Not just any laughter, but that specific brand of girlish giggling that women do when they're being absolutely diabolical and think no one's listening. It was coming from the guest room, the one we'd converted into what Sophia called her glam room, which was really just a glorified closet with good lighting and enough makeup to paint a small army. The door was cracked open, just enough for sound to escape. And like an idiot, I stopped walking. I should have kept going. I should have minded my own business. But curiosity, as they say, is a total bastard. Okay, so everyone knows the plan, right? That was Sophia's voice, pitched higher than usual with excitement. She sounded like a sorority girl planning rush week, which, knowing her friends, wasn't too far off from their actual mental age. I stood there frozen like a deer in headlights, holding these stupid glasses and trying to process what the hell I was hearing. The plan? What plan? Were they planning a surprise for Jessica? A flash mob? Please, God, not a flash mob. I couldn't handle watching rich people attempt choreography. "Oh my God, yes!" Chloe squealed, and I could practically hear her clapping her hands together like a trained seal. This is going to be absolutely iconic, like people are going to talk about this for months. Chloe had a tendency to describe everything as iconic, from her morning smoothies to the way her dog sat. The word had lost all meaning in her vocabulary, but she wielded it with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no in her entire life. She was the type of person who thought being witch was a personality trait, and that having an opinion on rosé qualified as being cultured. Then came Isabella's voice, smooth and calculating like a lawyer closing a deal. "So, let me get this straight. You're going to wait until everyone's watching, drop the bomb, and then we all act shocked and supportive." There was a pause, and I could hear the rustle of fabric, probably someone adjusting their designer outfit in the mirror. And David has absolutely no idea. My blood pressure spiked so fast I almost dropped the glasses. David has no idea about what? Why was my name being used in a sentence that involved bombs and acting? This was starting to sound less like party planning and more like a goddamn heist movie. "Not a clue," Sophia said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. That particular smile that she used when she was being clever, or at least when she thought she was being clever. He's been so busy playing servant all night, he hasn't noticed anything. It's actually kind of perfect. The way she said servant made my stomach turn, not even trying to hide the contempt, not even bothering to pretend I was her partner in this circus, just straight up admitting that she saw me as the help. Cool, cool, cool. Nothing says healthy marriage like dehumanizing your spouse to your friends for entertainment purposes. Jessica's voice chimed in, breathy and excited, like she'd just discovered a new brunch spot. "Okay, but what exactly are you going to say? We need to make sure the delivery is perfect, like award-worthy." Award-worthy? What in the actual hell was happening? Were they workshopping dialogue? Was my marriage turning into community theater? I pressed closer to the wall, careful not to make a sound, my heart pounding so loud, I was convinced they could hear it through the door. "So, I'm thinking," Sophia began, and I could tell she was doing that thing where she paced while talking, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. "I'll wait until the music gets lowered for the cake, right? Everyone will already be paying attention. Then I'll turn to David and say something like, 'We need to talk, really serious, you know?' And then I'll say, 'I've been thinking, and I don't think this marriage is working anymore.'" The silence that followed felt like it lasted an hour, but it was probably only a few seconds. My brain was trying to process the words I just heard while simultaneously trying to convince me I'd misheard. Maybe she said, "This marriage is really working," and I just had selective hearing. Maybe I was having a stroke. Maybe this was all a nightmare and I'd wake up and everything would be fine. "Oh my God!" Chloe gasped, breaking the silence. "That's brutal! I love it!" Of course she loved it. Chloe loved anything that involved drama that wasn't happening to her. She was the kind of person who watched reality TV and genuinely believed she'd handle situations better than the people on screen. Never mind that her biggest life challenge had been choosing between 2 yacht clubs for her membership. "And that's when we all jump in, right?" Isabella asked, always the strategist. "We act all supportive, tell her she deserves better, really play it up." I could hear the excitement building in her voice, like they were planning a surprise party instead of orchestrating the public humiliation of another human being. My human being, the guy who'd spent the last 3 hours setting up their stupid party and listening to their stupid conversations about their stupid lives. "Exactly," Sophia practically shouted, then lowered her voice, probably remembering that sound travels in expensive lofts. "When I say this marriage isn't working, you all need to laugh a little like you're uncomfortable but also kinda saw it coming, and then say stuff like, 'You deserve so much better,' and 'We've been worried about you.' Really sell it, you know?" She was literally directing them. This was a production. My marriage was being turned into a theatrical performance for the amusement of people who thought empathy was a type of imported cheese. "What do you think he'll do?" Jessica asked, and there was genuine curiosity in her voice, like she was asking about a science experiment. "Will he cry? Beg? Oh God, what if he makes a scene?" The way she said "makes a scene" dripped with anticipation. She wanted me to make a scene. They all did. This wasn't just about humiliating me. It was about creating a moment they could rehash at brunch for the next 6 months. Remember when Sophia faked dumped David and he totally lost it? Classic. "He'll probably just stand there looking pathetic," Sophia said. And the casual cruelty in her voice hit me like a freight train. "He never knows what to say when I put him on the spot. He'll stammer, maybe try to laugh it off, and then I'll let it go on for just long enough before I say, 'Just kidding,' and everyone will laugh and it'll be this whole hilarious moment." Hilarious? She thought destroying my dignity in front of strangers would be hilarious? This woman I'd married, the one I'd supported through her failed business ventures and listened to complain about her friends for hours, thought using me as a prop in her comedy sketch was good entertainment? The reality of what I just heard settled over me like a wet blanket. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a joke I wasn't in on. This was calculated, planned, rehearsed humiliation. Sophia and her terrible friends had sat in that room and choreographed my public embarrassment like it was a TikTok dance. And they'd done it casually, easily, like it was the most natural thing in the world to treat your husband like a punching bag for social media clout. I stood there in that hallway holding those ridiculous wine glasses, and something inside me shifted. The anger was there, sure, bubbling up like lava, but there was something else too. Clarity. For the first time in months, maybe years, I saw the situation exactly as it was. I wasn't a partner to Sophia. I was an accessory. I wasn't a husband. I was a supporting character in her never-ending quest for validation from people who didn't actually care about her. And tonight, I was supposed to be the comic relief, the bumbling fool who got dumped for laughs. But here's the thing about eavesdropping. Sometimes you hear exactly what you need to hear to make a decision you've been avoiding. And as I stood there, listening to these women plot my humiliation like it was a harmless prank, I made a choice. If Sophia wanted a show, I'd give her a show. Just not the one she'd rehearsed. Not even close. Because the best thing about being underestimated is that people never see you coming when you finally decide to play the game. and I was about to play it better than any of them could have imagined. So, here's a fun fact about human psychology. When someone plans to publicly humiliate you and you find out about it beforehand, you have two options. Option A is to confront them immediately, cause a scene, and let your emotions run wild like a toddler who missed nap time. Option B is to play it cool. Let them think they're still in control and wait for the perfect moment to detonate their entire plan in their faces. Guess which option I chose? If you guessed option A, you don't know me at all. And frankly, you haven't been paying attention. I walked back into the main party area carrying those wine glasses like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just overheard my wife and her discount Desperate Housewives cast members planning my public execution. My hands were steady, my face was calm, and internally, I was running through every possible scenario like a chess grandmaster on espresso. The key to pulling off what I was about to do was simple. Act completely normal. Be the same, agreeable, slightly awkward husband they all expected. Give them absolutely zero reason to suspect that I knew anything. Method acting, baby. Daniel Day-Lewis would have been proud. I set the glasses down on the kitchen counter and immediately made my way to the bar setup. If I was going to survive the next few hours of this psychological warfare disguised as a birthday party, I was going to need alcohol. Not the fancy stuff Sophia had purchased for her guests. Oh no. I reached into the back of the cabinet and pulled out the good bourbon, the bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion. Well, finding out your wife thinks you're a human prop definitely qualified as special, even if it wasn't the kind of Hallmark makes cards for. I poured myself 3 fingers worth, no ice, and took a long sip. The burn felt appropriate, like my insides were matching my emotional state. Around me, the party was starting to fill up with exactly the kind of people you'd expect at a Jessica birthday bash. Men in sport coats that cost more than my monthly salary, discussing cryptocurrency and real estate investments like they were saving the world. Women in dresses that required special undergarments and probably came with insurance policies, talking about their Pilates instructors and their upcoming trips to the Maldives. Everyone air kissing, everyone fake laughing, everyone performing their assigned role in this theater of the absurd. David, a voice cut through my thoughts, and I turned to see Mark, one of the few normal people in Sophia's extended social circle. He worked in finance, but hadn't completely sold his soul yet, which made him an outlier in this crowd. "Man, you look like you need that drink. Rough night?" He clinked his glass against mine, and I forced a smile that probably looked more like a grimace. "You have no idea," I said, taking another sip. "Just doing my part to make sure Jessica's 30th is memorable." The irony of that statement wasn't lost on me. Oh, it was going to be memorable. All right. People would be talking about this party for years, just not for the reasons Sophia and her crew were expecting. Mark laughed and launched into a story about some disaster at his office, and I nodded along, giving him just enough attention to seem engaged while my mind was elsewhere, plotting and planning.
Across the room, I could see Sophia holding court with her friends, all of them clustered together like a pack of well-dressed hyenas. Every so often, one of them would glance my way, and I'd catch this little smirk, this knowing look that said, "Just wait." Jessica kept checking her phone, probably timing out when the big moment would happen. Chloe was practically vibrating with excitement, like a kid waiting for Christmas morning. And Isabella, ever the cool one, was sipping her wine and surveying the room like a general before a battle. I made a point of circulating through the party, being extra friendly, extra helpful, extra normal. I complimented some guy named Brandon on his watch, even though it looked like something a Bond villain would wear. I listened to a woman named Stephanie explain about her new interior designer for 15 minutes, nodding at all the right moments. Even though I couldn't have cared less about her choice between eggshell and cream for her dining room walls, I was the picture of the agreeable husband, the supportive partner, the guy who knew his place in the social hierarchy and was comfortable with it. But inside, I was composing my response, rehearsing my lines, preparing for the performance of a lifetime. See, the thing about people like Sophia and her friends is that they operate on a very specific set of assumptions. They assume that because I'm quiet, I'm weak. They assume that because I don't flaunt money I don't have, I lack confidence. They assume that because I've put up with their nonsense for years, I'll continue to put up with it indefinitely. These assumptions were about to get shattered like a wine glass at a Greek wedding. "David, sweetie, can you help me with something in the kitchen?" Sophia appeared at my elbow, her hand touching my arm in that possessive way she had. Up close, I could see the excitement in her eyes, barely concealed behind her practiced smile. This was it. She was setting up the stage, getting me into position for the big performance. I wanted to laugh, to tell her right then and there that I knew everything, but that would have ruined the surprise. And after what I'd overheard, I deserved to have a little fun, too. "Of course, honey," I said, matching her fake sweetness with my own. "Whatever you need." We walked toward the kitchen, and I could feel eyes following us. Her friends had taken up strategic positions around the room, phones out, ready to capture the moment for posterity and probably Instagram. The music was getting lower, conversations were naturally quieting down, and I realized with dark amusement they'd actually choreographed this whole thing down to the soundtrack. Jessica sidled up next to us, playing her part perfectly. "Oh, Sophia, are you okay? You look stressed." The concern in her voice was about as genuine as a $3 bill. But she delivered the line with the conviction of someone who definitely practiced in front of a mirror. I had to hand it to them, they'd really committed to this bit. If only they'd put this much effort into being decent human beings. "I'm fine, Jess," Sophia said, her voice already taking on that theatrical quality. "Actually, you know what? I'm not fine. David and I need to talk right now." In front of everyone, she turned to face the crowd, which had conveniently gathered closer, forming a perfect semicircle around us, like we were about to perform a scene from a soap opera, which, in a way, we were. I took another sip of my bourbon and settled into my role. My face was neutral, maybe slightly confused, exactly what they'd expect from me. Internally, I was running through my response one more time, making sure every word was perfect, every pause calculated. I'd learned a long time ago that the best revenge isn't loud or messy. It's cold, precise, and completely unexpected. It's giving people exactly what they ask for in a way they never saw coming. Chloe moved closer, her phone definitely recording now. Isabella positioned herself where she could see both Sophia and me, her face already arranged in an expression of concerned support. Other guests were whispering, sensing drama, that universal human instinct that makes us all rubberneck at car accidents. The stage was set, the actors were in position, and the audience was primed. Everything was going exactly according to Sophia's plan, except for one tiny detail. I wasn't following the script. I wasn't going to be the stammering, confused husband who got humiliated for their entertainment. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me hurt or embarrassed. I was going to take their little prank and flip it so hard they'd need a chiropractor. Because here's what they'd forgotten in all their planning and rehearsing. I'd been watching them play their social games for years. I'd been taking notes. I'd been learning. And I was about to graduate with honors. Sophia cleared her throat and the room went even quieter. Someone actually turned off the music completely, and the silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with a knife. She looked at me with those big eyes, the ones she used when she wanted something, and opened her mouth to deliver her prepared lines. This was it, the moment she'd been building up to, the one she and her friends had giggled about in the guest room like middle schoolers planning a prank.
I stood there, bourbon in hand, face calm, heart rate steady, and waited. Let her have her moment. Let her say her piece. Let her think just for a few more seconds that this was going to go the way she'd planned. Because the look on her face when I flipped the script was going to be worth every second of humiliation she'd intended for me. They wanted a show. They wanted drama. They wanted something to talk about at brunch for the next 6 months. Oh, I was about to give them the performance of a lifetime. And unlike their carefully rehearsed nonsense, mine was going to be completely, beautifully, devastatingly improvised. The moment arrived with all the subtlety of a freight train crashing through a china shop. Sophia took a deep breath, the kind actors take before delivering their Oscar-winning monologue, and I had to suppress the urge to slow clap. The dedication to the performance was honestly impressive. If she'd put this much effort into our actual marriage, we might not be standing here in front of 30 people who were salivating at the prospect of witnessing someone else's relationship implode. But hey, priorities, right? "David," she began, her voice projecting across the room like she was performing at the Globe Theater.
We need to talk. Ah, yes, the 4 words that have struck fear into the hearts of men since the beginning of time, the phrase that makes your stomach drop, your palms sweat, and your brain immediately start cataloging every possible thing you might have done wrong in the past 6 months. Dishes in the sink, forgotten anniversary, breathed too loudly. The possibilities were endless, and every guy in that room probably felt a sympathetic twinge of dread. Except I didn't feel dread. I felt something closer to anticipation, like a poker player holding a royal flush. While everyone else at the table was betting big on their mediocre hands, I took a casual sip of my bourbon and raised my eyebrows in what I hoped was a convincing impression of mild concern. "Okay," I said simply, my voice steady. "What's up?" See, the thing about playing dumb is that you have to commit to it completely. Can't overdo it, can't underdo it, just enough confusion to seem genuine. The crowd had formed a perfect circle around us now, like we were gladiators in the world's most passive-aggressive coliseum. I could see Chloe practically bouncing on her heels, her phone held at the perfect angle to capture Sophia's face. Jessica was biting her lip, probably trying not to smile too early and ruin the serious tone they were going for. Isabella stood with her arms crossed, already wearing her supportive friend expression like a costume. And in the background, I could see other guests whispering, exchanging glances, that universal human reflex that makes us all gather around drama like moths to a flame. Sophia's hand went to her chest, right over her heart, in a gesture I'd seen her practice in the mirror before. She was really selling this. "I've been thinking," she continued, her voice wavering just slightly for effect. "And I've realized something important." She paused for dramatic effect, letting the tension build. Someone in the crowd actually gasped softly. A man I didn't recognize had his mouth slightly open, fully invested in this theater production. "I don't think this marriage is working anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop, a mouse sneeze, a snowflake land. Every single person in that room stopped breathing simultaneously. It was like someone had hit pause on reality itself. I watched the words hang in the air between us, saw the expectation on Sophia's faces, the anticipation on her friends' faces, the shock on everyone else's faces. They were all waiting for me to crumble, to beg, to make a scene, to give them the show they'd paid admission for. Instead, I nodded slowly, like I was considering what she'd said with great thoughtfulness. I swirled my bourbon in my glass, took another sip, and let the moment stretch just long enough to make it uncomfortable. Then I smiled. Not a fake smile, not a sad smile, but a genuine relieved smile that came from somewhere deep in my soul. "You know what?" I said, my voice clear and calm. "You're absolutely right." The confusion on Sophia's face was instantaneous and beautiful.
Her mouth opened slightly, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows furrowed, and I could see her brain trying to process what I just said. This wasn't in the script. This wasn't what she'd rehearsed with her Greek chorus of terrible friends. I was supposed to stammer, to look hurt, to ask what she meant. I wasn't supposed to agree with her. "Wait," she said, her theatrical voice faltering into something more genuine. "What?" The single word came out strangled, confused, like she'd just been told the sky was actually green and needed a moment to recalibrate her entire understanding of reality.
Behind her, I could see Jessica's smile freeze on her face. Chloe's phone dipped slightly, like she wasn't sure if this was still worth recording. Isabella's arms uncrossed, her carefully composed expression cracking into something that looked like genuine surprise. "You're right," I repeated, louder this time so everyone could hear. "This marriage isn't working. It's been a disaster, honestly. So yeah, let's call it. We're done. Finished. Over. Congratulations on your freedom." I raised my glass in a mock toast, and the bourbon caught the light perfectly, like even the alcohol was in on the joke. "I genuinely hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, because clearly it wasn't me." A guy in a velvet suit, some tech bro named Kyle or Cody or Chad, actually choked on his champagne. The sound broke the silence like a gunshot. And suddenly, the room erupted into confused murmurs. People were looking at each other, trying to figure out if this was part of the plan or if they were witnessing an actual divorce announcement. Sophia just stood there frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish that had suddenly found itself on dry land. "You're not serious," she finally managed to say, but her voice had lost all its theatrical power. Now she just sounded uncertain, vulnerable, and very, very confused. "You can't just agree with me. That's not... You're supposed to." She gestured vaguely with her hands, like she was trying to physically grab the words she needed from the air around her. "Supposed to what?" I asked, genuinely curious about how she'd finish that sentence. "Fight for you? Beg you to reconsider? Break down crying in front of all these people?" I gestured around the room at the captivated audience. "Nah, I'm good. If you're not happy, I'm not happy. So let's just rip the Band-Aid off. You know, you can keep the apartment, the furniture, all of it. I'll take my stuff and go. Hell, you can even keep the blender. I know how much you love your morning smoothies." The casual way I was discussing the end of our marriage was clearly not what anyone had expected. A woman I vaguely recognized from Sophia's yoga class had her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Mark, my finance buddy from earlier, was staring at me with something that looked suspiciously like admiration mixed with absolute horror. And Jessica, the birthday girl herself, looked like someone had just told her the party was canceled and everyone had to go home. "David, this isn't funny," Sophia said, and now there was an edge of panic in her voice. The careful composure was cracking, revealing something raw underneath. "You can't just... I wasn't being serious. This was supposed to be..." She stopped herself, realizing too late that she was about to admit the whole thing was a setup. Her eyes darted to Jessica, then to Chloe, looking for some kind of lifeline, some way to salvage this disaster. But I wasn't done yet. Oh no, I was just getting warmed up. "You weren't serious?" I said, letting genuine confusion color my voice. "But you sounded so serious. You said our marriage isn't working, which, honestly, I've been thinking the same thing for months, but didn't want to rock the boat. So thank you, actually, for being brave enough to say it out loud. Really, this is great. We can get the paperwork started next week, split everything down the middle, and move on with our lives. Clean break, no hard feelings." "Stop it," Sophia whispered, but her voice carried in the silent room. "Just stop." The desperation was real now, leaking through every syllable.
This wasn't the fun prank she'd imagined. This wasn't the harmless joke that would end in laughter and Instagram stories. This was real, and it was happening, and she had no idea how to stop it because I'd taken her own weapon and turned it against her. "Stop what?" I asked innocently. "Agreeing with you? Being supportive of your decision? I mean, you're right, Sophia. We're not happy. You spend all your time with your friends. I work too much. We barely talk anymore. And when we do, it's usually you telling me how I'm not living up to your expectations. This has been coming for a while. And you were brave enough to pull the trigger. I respect that." Chloe finally found her voice, jumping in like the loyal friend she pretended to be. "Sophia was just expressing her feelings. David, you don't have to be so dramatic about it." The irony of her calling me dramatic when they'd literally staged this entire confrontation was so thick you could spread it on toast, but I let it slide. "Dramatic?" I laughed, a genuine laugh that probably sounded slightly unhinged. "I'm being the opposite of dramatic. I'm being practical. She said the marriage isn't working. I agreed. Now we move forward. What's dramatic about that? Would it be more dramatic if I fell to my knees and begged her to stay? Cried? Made a scene?" I looked around at the crowd. All these people who'd come for entertainment and were getting way more than they'd bargained for. "I'm just trying to handle this like an adult." Sophia's face had gone through several shades of pale, finally settling on something close to gray. Her carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the genuine distress that was written across every feature. "You're seriously not going to fight for me?" she asked. And there was something heartbreaking in her voice, something real that cut through all the pretense and performance. "After everything we've been through, you're just going to give up?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment I felt something close to pity. But then I remembered the conversation in the guest room, the laughter, the planning, the casual cruelty of turning your spouse into a punchline for your friend's amusement. And the pity evaporated like morning dew. "Give up?" I said softly. "Sophia, I fight for things that are worth fighting for. You just publicly announced that our marriage is over. What exactly am I supposed to be fighting for here? Your right to humiliate me? Your need for attention? Come on." The room had gone so quiet you could hear the ice melting in people's drinks. Somewhere in the background, I could hear the faint sound of traffic from the street below. A reminder that outside this bizarre bubble of manufactured drama, the real world was still turning. And it was to that real world that I was about to return, leaving behind this circus and everyone in it. If you've never witnessed 30 wealthy people experiencing collective discomfort at the same time, let me tell you, it's a sight to behold. The silence that had descended over Jessica's living room was the kind of silence you could bottle and sell as a sound effects track for horror movies. It was thick, suffocating, and absolutely delicious. I could practically hear the sound of pearls being clutched, stock portfolios being nervously checked, and prenups being mentally reviewed. This was not the kind of entertainment these people had signed up for. Sophia was still standing there frozen like someone had hit pause on her personal remote control. Her mouth was open, forming words that refused to come out, and her eyes had that deer-in-headlights quality that would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. Behind her, the holy trinity of terrible friends looked like they'd just witnessed a car crash in slow motion and couldn't look away. Jessica's birthday crown, a ridiculous sparkly thing she'd been wearing, ironically, sat crooked on her head, making her look less like a celebration and more like a tragedy. Chloe had finally lowered her phone completely, apparently deciding that this footage was either too good or too traumatizing to keep recording. And Isabella, always the most composed of the group, had her hand over her mouth like she was physically trying to stop herself from saying something that would make this situation worse. "Wait," Sophia finally managed, her voice coming out in a strangled whisper that somehow carried across the entire room. "What?" It was the same word she'd said before, but this time it had a different quality to it. Less confused, more panicked, like she was a computer that had just blue-screened and was desperately trying to reboot before everything crashed permanently. I took another leisurely sip of my bourbon, savoring both the taste and the moment. "What part was unclear?" I asked, tilting my head in genuine curiosity. "You said the marriage isn't working?" I agreed. "Pretty straightforward conversation, really. I mean, I've had more complicated interactions with customer service representatives." A nervous laugh rippled through the crowd at that, quickly stifled when people realized this maybe wasn't the time for amusement. But the damage was done. The tension had cracked, just slightly, and reality was starting to seep through. "You're humiliating me," Sophia hissed, her voice sharp and low, meant only for me, but definitely loud enough for the people closest to us to hear. The accusation hung in the air like smoke, and I had to fight the urge to laugh directly in her face. The sheer audacity of that statement, coming from the woman who'd literally planned to humiliate me as a party trick, was so absurd it almost looped back around to being impressive. "Oh, sweetheart," I said, and I made sure to use the exact same condescending tone she'd used with me earlier when critiquing my outfit. "You already booked that role yourself." I gestured vaguely at the room full of witnesses. "I'm just the guy who agreed with you. If you're feeling humiliated right now, maybe ask yourself why." I let that sink in for a moment, watching her face cycle through about 15 different emotions in rapid succession. "You brought this up in front of all these people. You made it public. You made it a spectacle. I just didn't follow your script." Mark, bless him, chose that moment to take a very large sip of his drink, and the sound of him swallowing was unnaturally loud in the quiet room. Someone coughed. Another person shifted their weight, and their shoes squeaked against the hardwood floor. These people, who probably attended board meetings and charity galas without breaking a sweat, were completely out of their depth when it came to witnessing authentic human conflict. They wanted drama, sure, but the sanitized kind, the kind you watch on reality TV while eating gourmet popcorn, not this raw, unscripted disaster unfolding in real time. Jessica finally decided to earn her position as ringleader and stepped forward, her hands raised in a placating gesture. "Okay, everyone, let's just take a breath here," she said in her best hostess voice, the one she probably used when guests got too drunk at her parties. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." She looked between Sophia and me like a referee trying to break up a boxing match. "Sophia, maybe you want to clarify what you meant." "I would love to hear the clarification," I said cheerfully, turning to face my wife fully. "Please enlighten me. What did you mean when you said our marriage isn't working? Because I interpreted that as our marriage isn't working, but apparently I'm not sophisticated enough to understand the nuances of high society communication." Sophia's eyes were starting to get that shiny quality that meant tears were incoming, and I could see her friends exchanging panicked glances. This was supposed to be fun for them, a harmless prank that would end with everyone laughing and me looking slightly foolish, but ultimately fine. Instead, they'd created a genuine crisis, and none of them knew how to fix it because none of them had ever actually dealt with real consequences before in their entire privileged lives. "She just wanted to see if you still care," Chloe blurted out immediately, looking like she regretted opening her mouth. But the words were out there now, floating in the air like a confession at a murder trial. The room somehow got even quieter, if that was possible. A woman in the corner was clutching her wine glass so hard I was genuinely worried it might shatter. I turned to look at Chloe, letting my expression shift into something resembling pity mixed with disbelief. "She wanted to see if I still care?" I repeated slowly like I was testing out a foreign language. "By publicly announcing she wants to end our marriage in front of 30 people?" I nodded thoughtfully. "You know, that's actually fascinating. It's like emotional manipulation disguised as a social experiment. Very cutting edge, very modern. Should probably be studied by psychologists." "Don't be an Isabella snapped, finally finding her voice. Her composure had returned somewhat, and she was clearly trying to regain control of the situation. You know what she meant. It was supposed to be a joke. A joke, I said flatly. Right? Hey everyone, I raised my voice and addressed the crowd directly. Quick question, how many of you thought this was funny? Show of hands. I looked around the room, making eye contact with various people. Not a single hand went up. In fact, most people suddenly became very interested in their shoes, their drinks, or the very fascinating ceiling tiles. Huh, weird. Looks like the joke didn't land. A man I recognized as someone's husband, couldn't remember whose, cleared his throat nervously. Maybe we should all just give them some privacy, he suggested weakly, but nobody moved. It was like watching a nature documentary where the prey is frozen, hoping the predator won't notice them if they stay perfectly still. These people had come for entertainment, and by God, they were going to see how this played out, even if it made them uncomfortable enough to need therapy afterwards. No, please stay, I said, waving my hand magnanimously. After all, Sophia made this a public conversation. Would be rude to exclude everyone now. I turned back to my wife, who looked like she was rapidly cycling through the 5 stages of grief and getting stuck on denial. So, let me get this straight. You wanted to test my devotion to you by pretending to dump me in front of all your friends, and you expected me to, what exactly? Beg, cry, profess my undying love while everyone recorded it for social media? Sophia started, but her voice cracked and she had to stop. A single tear rolled down her cheek, ruining her carefully applied mascara. Part of me, a very small part that still remembered the woman I'd married 3 years ago, felt bad. But that part was quickly drowned out by the memory of her laughing with her friends about how pathetic I'd look when they executed their little plan. And I just wanted to see if gravity still works, I continued, my voice conversational. You know, Newton's law. What goes up must come down. Well, congratulations. We both got our answers tonight. I raised my glass again in another mock toast. You wanted to see if I still care, and I wanted to see what would happen if I stopped playing along with your games. Turns out the answer to both questions is pretty enlightening. Kyle, or Cody or Chad, the velvet suit guy who choked earlier, was now leaning against the wall like he needed physical support to process what he was witnessing. His champagne glass hung loosely in his hand, forgotten. Next to him, his date, a blonde woman in a dress that probably cost more than my car, was whispering something in his ear, but he just shook his head slowly, eyes fixed on the unfolding drama like it was a train wreck he couldn't look away from. You seriously expect us to believe you don't care at all? Jessica asked, her birthday girl entitlement finally overriding her shock. You've been married for 3 years. You're just going to throw that away because of one misunderstanding? One misunderstanding, I repeated, letting the words roll around in my mouth like fine wine. Is that what we're calling premeditated emotional manipulation now? Good to know. I'll update my vocabulary. I set my empty glass down on the nearest surface with a decisive click. And you're right, 3 years is a long time. Long enough to realize when someone views you as a prop in their personal reality show rather than an actual human being with feelings. The room had divided into 2 clear camps. Now, people who thought I was being cruel, and people who were starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, I had a point. I could see it in their faces, the slow, dawning comprehension that this situation was way more complicated than a simple misunderstanding. Mark caught my eye and gave me the slightest nod, and I realized he'd figured it out. He knew this had been a setup, and he knew I'd somehow discovered it. Sophia was full-on crying now, tears streaming down her face, her hands shaking. "Please," she said, and the word came out broken. "Please, David, I made a mistake. Can we just talk about this privately?"
The irony of her asking to act like adults after staging a public breakup prank wasn't lost on me, or apparently on several other people in the room, based on the skeptical looks being exchanged. "Privately?" I said, and I couldn't keep the bitter laugh out of my voice. "Now you want privacy after this whole performance? After you literally gathered an audience to witness what you thought would be my humiliation?" I shook my head slowly. "Nah, you wanted a show, remember? You wanted it to be iconic. Wasn't that the word? Well, here's your encore." Watching Sophia's face turn various shades of red was like watching a time-lapse of a sunset, except instead of being beautiful, it was the visual representation of someone's ego imploding in real time. Her carefully constructed facade was cracking like cheap porcelain, and underneath it all was panic. Pure, unadulterated, designer label-wearing panic. She looked around at her friends desperately, silently begging them to do something, say something, fix this disaster they'd all created together, like a group project gone horribly wrong. "You're humiliating me," she said again, louder this time, as if increasing the volume would somehow make the accusation more valid. Her voice had taken on a shrill quality that made several people wince. A waiter who'd been frozen in the corner holding a tray of canopies finally decided this was his cue to exit and practically sprinted toward the kitchen. Smart man, probably had better survival instincts than half the people in this room. I looked at her, really looked at her, and something inside me shifted from anger to something colder, something final. "Oh, sweetheart," I said, and I made sure my voice dripped with the exact same patronizing sweetness she'd used on me for months. "You already booked that role yourself. I'm just a supporting character, remember?" I gestured around at the sea of stunned faces. "You cast yourself as the star of this little drama. You wrote the script. You directed the scene. You even provided the audience. All I did was deliver my lines differently than you expected." The metaphor seemed to hit her like a physical blow. Her mouth opened and closed several times, making her look like an extremely well-dressed fish gasping for air. Behind her, Chloe was frantically whispering something to Isabella, probably trying to figure out damage control strategies. Jessica had abandoned her birthday crown entirely, setting it on a nearby table like even she couldn't maintain the pretense of celebration anymore. This party had officially become a wake from my marriage, except nobody had brought appropriate funeral attire. "This is insane," Sophia finally managed to say, her voice breaking on the last word. "You're acting insane over nothing. It was just supposed to be funny." There was that word again, funny. Like emotional manipulation was just another form of entertainment. Like pranking your spouse was equivalent to surprising them with breakfast in bed? The disconnect was so profound, I almost felt bad for her. Almost. "Funny," I repeated, tasting the word like it was something bitter. "You know what's funny? I barely fight for gym motivation, darling. So, what made you think I'd fight for this?" I gestured vaguely between us, encompassing our entire relationship in one dismissive wave. "You wanted to see if I'd beg, if I'd plead, if I'd make a fool of myself trying to keep you? Congratulations on getting your answer." A woman I'd never seen before, probably someone's +1 who was deeply regretting her decision to attend this party, actually gasped out loud. The sound cut through the tension like a knife through butter, and suddenly people remembered they were supposed to be breathing. The room came alive with nervous movements. Someone shifted their weight. Another person took a sip of wine. A man adjusted his collar. All those little human movements that happen when people are deeply uncomfortable but can't leave because they're trapped by social obligation and morbid curiosity. Chloe, emboldened by desperation or stupidity, decided to step into the fray. "David, you're being unnecessarily harsh," she said.
her voice carrying that particular tone rich people use when they're trying to sound reasonable but really just sound entitled. Sophia is clearly upset. Can't you see that? Have some compassion. The audacity of her asking me for compassion after they literally planned to humiliate me as party entertainment was so staggering, I actually had to pause and process it. I turned to face her directly, and she actually took a small step backward. Good, maybe some survival instinct was finally kicking in. Compassion, I said slowly, like I was explaining a complex concept to a child. You want me to have compassion for someone who gathered her friends, rehearsed lines about ending our marriage, and planned to perform this whole scene for laughs? That's what you're asking me for right now? Compassion? It wasn't like that, Chloe protested weakly, but her voice lacked conviction. She knew it was exactly like that. They all knew it. The only question was whether they'd admit it or continue to gaslight me into thinking I was overreacting. Really? I asked, raising my eyebrows. What was it like then? Enlighten me. Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like a group of bored rich people decided to use someone's actual marriage as entertainment because their lives are so devoid of genuine meaning they have to manufacture drama to feel alive. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but I didn't take them back. Sometimes the truth is harsh. Sometimes it needs to be. Isabella's jaw dropped open so fast I'm surprised it didn't dislocate. Several other people in the room made various sounds of shock and discomfort. Kyle, Cody Chad, put his hand over his mouth like he was physically trying to stop himself from reacting. And Mark, my man Mark, was looking at me with something that resembled awe mixed with concern, like he couldn't decide if I was having a breakdown or the most impressive moment of clarity in my entire life. "That's cruel," Jessica said quietly, and for once she didn't sound performative. She sounded genuinely hurt, which would have meant more if she hadn't been one of the architects of this disaster. "We're Sophia's friends. We care about her. We were just trying to help her figure out if you still loved her." "By making her fake dump me in public?" I said, nodding slowly. "Yes, that's a very normal and healthy way to assess relationship dynamics. They should teach that in therapy school." Chapter 7. Emotional Manipulation as a Diagnostic Tool. Very cutting-edge stuff. The sarcasm was so thick you could spread it on bread, but I was beyond caring about being polite. Polite had gotten me into this situation. Honesty was going to get me out. Sophia wiped at her face, smearing her mascara even more, creating dark streaks down her cheeks that made her look like a sad clown. "I can't believe you're doing this to me," she said, her voice small and broken in front of everyone. "You're supposed to love me. You're supposed to protect me." And there it was, the core of the entire issue laid bare for everyone to see. In Sophia's world, love meant never holding her accountable. Protection meant executed in front of 30 people, and somehow I was the villain for not playing along. The mental gymnastics required to maintain that worldview could have won Olympic gold. "Protect you?" I asked, and my voice came out quieter than I intended. Quieter, but somehow more dangerous. From what exactly? From yourself? From your own choices? From the consequences of treating your husband like a prop in your personal reality show? I shook my head slowly. "I can't protect you from that, Sophia. Nobody can." "You're twisting everything," she cried. And now she was fully sobbing, her whole body shaking with the force of it. Part of me, that stupid part that still remembered our wedding day and the way she used to laugh at my jokes, wanted to comfort her. But that part was buried under 3 years of being slowly diminished, corrected, and treated like an accessory rather than a partner. "I'm not twisting anything," I said calmly. "I'm just refusing to let you rewrite history 5 minutes after it happened. You said our marriage isn't working in front of all these people with your friends backing you up. That happened. That's reality. The fact that you didn't expect me to agree doesn't change what you said." An older man I vaguely recognized, probably someone's father or uncle, cleared his throat. "Son," he said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd seen a lot of life, "maybe you should think about what you're throwing away here. Marriage is about forgiveness." His tone was gentle, grandfatherly, and probably would have worked on someone who didn't know the full context of the situation. "You're absolutely right, sir," I said, nodding respectfully. "Marriage is about forgiveness. It's also about respect, trust, and not using your partner as entertainment for your friends. When those things disappear, forgiveness becomes a band-aid on a bullet wound. Looks nice, doesn't fix the problem." The old man frowned, clearly not expecting that response, but he didn't push further. Smart man, knew when to retreat. More people in this room could have learned from his example. Sophia was looking around wildly now, searching for someone, anyone who would support her version of events. "Why is everyone just standing there?" she demanded, her voice rising to a pitch that probably bothered dogs in a 3-block radius. "He's being cruel. He's being heartless. Someone say something." But here's the thing about public spectacles. They cut both ways. When you make your private drama public, you don't get to control how people react to it. And judging by the uncomfortable faces around the room, people were starting to do the math and realize that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the bad guy in this scenario. Maybe the woman who'd staged a fake breakup for attention was getting exactly what she'd asked for, just not in the way she'd want it. "What do you want them to say, Sophia?" I asked, spreading my hands in a gesture of genuine curiosity. That I'm wrong? That you didn't plan this? That I should ignore what you said and pretend everything's fine? I laughed, but it was a hollow sound. That's not how reality works. You can't just reset the game when you don't like how it's going. "I hate you," she whispered, but it came out loud enough for everyone to hear. "I hate you so much right now." "That's fair," I said, and I meant it. Hate's honest, at least more honest than this whole setup was. I looked around the room one more time at all these people who'd come for a birthday party and gotten front row seats to a marriage dissolution. But here's the thing about hate, Sophia. It requires energy. It requires caring. And I'm all out of both. The finality in my voice seemed to register with her on some level because her face crumpled in a way that might have broken my heart if my heart hadn't already been shattered by her casual cruelty. But I was done. Done with the games, done with the manipulation, done with being treated like a supporting character in someone else's story. It was time for my exit. And unlike Sophia's carefully choreographed performance, mine was going to be real. There's something poetic about a good exit. Not the dramatic, door-slamming, glass-breaking, soap opera kind of exit that everyone expects. No, the really powerful exits are the quiet ones. The ones where you simply turn around, walk away, and leave everyone else to sit in the wreckage they created. That's the kind of exit I was planning. The kind that would live in these people's memories longer than any tantrum ever could. The kind that said more with silence than screaming ever would. I turned toward the door, and I swear I felt every single pair of eyes in that room lock onto me like heat-seeking missiles. The movement was slow, deliberate, the physical embodiment of, I'm done with this conversation and everything it represents. My feet, which had been rooted to that spot for what felt like hours, but was probably only 15 minutes, finally remembered how to move. One step, then another. The distance between me and that door was maybe 20 feet, but it felt like walking across the Grand Canyon. "David, wait!" Sophia's voice cracked through the silence like a whip, desperate and raw in a way I'd never heard before. Not when we'd fought about her spending habits, not when I'd suggested maybe we should spend more time together and less time with her friends. Not even during the actual hard conversations about our future. This was different. This was the sound of someone realizing they'd just set their entire life on fire and the extinguisher was walking away. I paused, but I didn't turn around. That would have given her hope. And hope was the last thing this situation needed. Hope was what kept people trapped in toxic patterns, convincing themselves that things would change when they never did. "Why?" I asked, my voice carrying across the silent room. "We just broke up, remember? You said it yourself. The marriage isn't working. I'm just respecting your wishes." Behind me, I could hear movement. Probably Sophia taking a step forward, or maybe one of her friends trying to physically stop her from making this worse. Someone knocked over a glass, and the sound of it hitting the floor but not breaking was somehow more jarring than if it had shattered. Life imitating art, or, in this case, a relationship that should have broken cleanly, but instead just kept rolling, causing more damage with every rotation. "You know that's not what I meant."
Sophia shouted, and there was anger mixed with the desperation now. Good anger I could work with. Anger was honest. "You're twisting my words. You're making me look like a villain when I was just—" She stopped herself, probably realizing that finishing that sentence with "just trying to humiliate you for fun" wouldn't help her case. I finally turned around, but I didn't walk back toward her. I stayed right where I was, one hand on the doorframe, my body language screaming, "I'm halfway out of here already." The visual probably looked like something out of a movie, the wrong protagonist making his exit while the antagonist begs him to stay. Except this wasn't a movie, this was my actual life, and I was the only one who got to direct it anymore. "Making you look like a villain," I repeated, and I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped. "Sophia, you did that all by yourself. I'm just the guy who refused to play the victim." I looked around at all the frozen faces, at Jessica still clutching her forgotten birthday crown, at Chloe with her phone hanging uselessly at her side, at Isabella who'd finally run out of smooth words to make this situation better. You wanted drama. You wanted a scene. You wanted something iconic to talk about at your next brunch. Well, congratulations. You got your season finale. People were whispering now, not even trying to be subtle about it. A woman near the bar was texting furiously, probably updating someone who'd missed the show. Kyle Cody Chad was shaking his head slowly, like he'd just witnessed something that challenged his entire understanding of relationship dynamics. And Mark, my boy Mark, caught my eye and gave me the smallest nod of approval. That nod meant more than any of the other reactions combined, because Mark was real. Mark didn't perform for an audience. Mark was the kind of friend who'd help you move bodies at 3 a.m., no questions asked. "Please," Sophia said, and the word came out as barely more than a whisper, but somehow it carried across the entire room. "Please don't leave like this, not in front of everyone. Can we just talk privately like adults?" The irony of her asking to act like adults after staging a public breakup prank wasn't lost on anyone, based on the uncomfortable shifting around the room. "Adults?" I said, nodding slowly. "Right, because adults definitely plan elaborate schemes to embarrass their spouses in front of 30 witnesses. That's peak maturity right there, should probably be in textbooks." I adjusted my grip on the doorframe, and several people actually leaned forward like they were afraid I might bolt and they'd miss the conclusion of this drama. "You made this public, Sophia. You brought all these people into our relationship. You don't get to suddenly demand privacy when the script didn't go your way." Jessica finally found her voice again, though it came out smaller than her usual performative volume. "David, this is my birthday party. Can you please not do this here? Not now." The entitlement was staggering. Her birthday party, where she'd helped orchestrate my humiliation, and somehow I'm the one being rude by not playing along? The mental gymnastics required to maintain that logic could have won Olympic gold.
"Your birthday party," I repeated, and I actually smiled at her. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile that says, "I see exactly what you are, and I'm not impressed." "You're right, Jessica."
This is your party, your special day. The day you helped your best friend plan to publicly humiliate her husband for entertainment. Happy 30th. Hope it was everything you dreamed it would be. Her face went pale, then red, then pale again, cycling through colors like a malfunctioning traffic light. Chloe put a hand on her shoulder, probably offering comfort, but Jessica shrugged it off. Even she was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, they'd miscalculated. That maybe treating people like props in their social media reality show had consequences. Novel concept, I know. "You're cruel," Isabella said, her voice cold and sharp like a knife. "You're standing there acting like you're better than all of us, but look what you're doing to her. Look at Sophia. She's falling apart, and you don't even care." She gestured dramatically at my wife, who was indeed falling apart. Mascara running, dress rumpled, the picture of distress. It would have been more effective if I hadn't known the whole thing was manufactured drama gone wrong. "I don't care," I said, and the simple honesty of it seemed to hit harder than any elaborate speech could have. "You're right, Isabella. I don't care. Not anymore. Not after tonight. Not after realizing that my wife and her friends view me as entertainment rather than a human being. You want me to care about her feelings? Where was the concern for mine when you were all in that guest room planning this?" The silence that followed was different from all the previous silences. This one was heavy, with realization, with understanding, with the slow dawning comprehension that maybe they'd pushed someone too far. And now they were watching the consequences unfold in real time. Several people were nodding slightly, putting pieces together, probably running through the evening in their minds and seeing it from a different angle. "This wasn't supposed to happen," Chloe said weakly, more to herself than anyone else. "This was supposed to be fun, light, a joke." She looked around at the wreckage of the party, at the crying bride, at the guests who'd gone from excited to traumatized, at the birthday girl who looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. How did this go so wrong? "You planned someone's humiliation and expected them to laugh about it," Mark said, speaking up for the first time. His voice was calm, measured, but it cut through the room like a cleaver. "That's how it went wrong. You thought you could play with someone's emotions as a party trick, and you didn't consider that maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't appreciate it." He looked at me and raised his glass in a subtle salute. "Good for you, man. Seriously." Sophia's legs seemed to give out, and she sank onto the nearest couch, her head in her hands. The picture of devastation, the wronged woman, the misunderstood wife. Except we all knew better now. The curtain had been pulled back, and the wizard was just a person with a microphone and too much audacity. "I can't believe this is happening," she said through her hands. "I can't believe you're doing this to me." "To you," I repeated, and the laugh that came out was genuinely amused. Even now, even after everything, it's about what I'm doing to you, not about what you did, not about the plan, not about the casual cruelty, just about poor Sophia, the victim of her husband's unreasonable reaction to being used as a prop. I shook my head slowly. That's the problem right there. That's always been the problem. I turned back toward the door, and this time I meant it. This time I was actually leaving. No more dramatic pauses, no more speeches, no more giving them chances to make this worse. "Enjoy the rest of the party, everyone," I said over my shoulder. "Sorry to be a buzzkill on your entertainment for the evening. Feel free to discuss this at your next brunch. I'm sure you'll have plenty to say." "David!" Sophia screamed, actually screamed like someone was physically harming her. "You can't just walk out. You can't leave me like this. What am I supposed to do?" I paused at the threshold, one foot already in the hallway. Freedom so close I could taste it. "Figure it out," I said simply. "You're a strong, independent woman, right? That's what you're always telling people. So be that. Figure out your own life without using me as a security blanket." You can publicly mock and then, because I couldn't resist one final observation, "Oh, and maybe get better friends. These ones are toxic." The door closed behind me with a soft click, and I didn't slam it. That was important. Slamming doors is what people do when they're still emotionally invested, when they still care enough to make noise. Quiet closing is what you do when you're genuinely done, when you've reached that place of such complete detachment that even the satisfaction of a dramatic exit isn't worth the energy. I woke up on Mark's couch at approximately 6:47 a.m. to the sound of my phone vibrating so aggressively it was doing a little dance across his coffee table. The thing sounded like an angry bee trapped in a tin can. And for a moment, in that blissful space between sleep and consciousness, I forgot why I was on a couch that smelled faintly of expensive leather and cheaper beer. Then reality came flooding back like ice water to the face. And I remembered. I'd walked out on my wife at a party in front of 30 witnesses after she'd tried to fake dump me for entertainment purposes. Right, that happened. The phone was still buzzing. I reached for it with one hand while using the other to rub the sleep from my eyes. And when I looked at the screen, I had to blink several times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. 43 notifications? 43. I'd been asleep for maybe 6 hours, and in that time, my phone had apparently become ground zero for an emotional breakdown transmitted via text message. Every single notification was from Sophia, and they were time-stamped in a way that told a very specific story about her journey through the 5 stages of grief, minus the acceptance part. The first text had come through at 11:34 p.m., roughly 20 minutes after I'd left the party. "David, where did you go? People are asking about you." Classic Sophia, worried about appearances first, actual problems second. What would people think if the husband just disappeared? How would she explain that to her friends? Never mind the whole fake breakup disaster. The real crisis was managing the optics. 11:47 p.m. "This is ridiculous. You're being childish. Come back so we can talk like adults." Ah, yes, because nothing says adult conversation like staging a public humiliation prank. The irony was so thick you could build a house with it. 12:03 a.m. "I was joking. It was a joke. Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" There it was. The classic abuser's defense. It was just a joke. Why can't you take a joke? You're too sensitive. Never mind that jokes are supposed to be funny for everyone involved, not just the person making them at someone else's expense. I sat up on the couch, my back protesting the awkward sleeping position, and kept scrolling. This was better than morning coffee for waking up. Every text was a little window into Sophia's mental state as the night had progressed, and I hadn't responded. It was like watching a real-time documentary about what happens when someone who's used to getting their way suddenly doesn't. 12:31 a.m. "You're overreacting. Do you know how embarrassing this is for me? Everyone is asking where you went, and I don't know what to tell them." Notice how it was embarrassing for her, not for me, the person who was supposed to be the victim of her little prank. Notice how her concern was explaining my absence, not examining why I left in the first place. Self-awareness had left the building, and it wasn't coming back anytime soon. 1:15 a.m. "I can't believe you just left me at my best friend's birthday party. What kind of husband does that?
The kind of husband who's tired of being treated like a prop, Sophia. That's what kind. But sure, let's focus on the social faux pas of leaving a party rather than the emotional manipulation that preceded it. 1:44 a.m. Fine, don't answer. Be that way. I don't need you anyway. Ah, we'd reached the anger stage. This was always fun. Watching someone try to convince themselves they don't need something while simultaneously texting them. It's like watching someone say they're not hungry while eating an entire pizza. 2:18 a.m. You know what? You're right. This marriage isn't working. You're too sensitive, too boring, too ordinary. I deserve better than this. And there it was, the lashing out, trying to hurt me the way she felt hurt. Except the words bounced off like rubber bullets off a tank. When someone shows you who they really are, insults lose their power because you already know the truth. 2:47 a.m. I didn't mean that. I'm sorry. Please come home. We need to talk. Oh, look, bargaining, right on schedule. It's almost impressive how predictable people are when they're spiraling. You could set a watch by the stages of a narcissist's breakdown. 3:23 a.m. David, seriously, where are you? Are you safe? I'm worried about you. Now we'd moved to concern trolling, pretending this was about my safety rather than her need for control. I wondered if she'd actually convinced herself she was worried, or if she knew she was just trying a different tactic. Mark emerged from his bedroom, looking like he'd been awoken by the same buzzing sound, his hair sticking up at odd angles and his eyes still half closed. "Dude," he mumbled, shuffling toward his kitchen, "is your phone having a seizure, or is that just my hangover making me hear things?" He opened his fridge and pulled out orange juice, drinking directly from the carton like a true bachelor. "Sophia's texting me," I said, still scrolling through the digital novel she'd written during the night. "Apparently she has thoughts. Many, many thoughts." "How many thoughts we talkin'?" Mark asked, now slightly more awake and definitely more interested. He came over and peered at my phone screen, letting out a low whistle when he saw the sheer number of messages. "Jesus Christ, man, that's a dissertation. That's more words than my senior thesis." 4:01 a.m. "You're cruel. You know that. You're a cruel person. I can't believe I married someone so heartless." We'd circled back to anger. Apparently, the stages weren't linear. They were more like a drunk person wandering through a maze, hitting the same walls repeatedly. 4:33 a.m. "Everyone thinks you're wrong. Jessica said you were horrible. Chloe said you need therapy. Isabella said you're emotionally abusive." Ah, yes, the appeal to authority. My wife's terrible friends, the same ones who'd helped her plan my humiliation, thought I was the bad guy. What a shocking development. I'm sure their opinions were totally objective and not at all influenced by their own involvement in the disaster. 5:12 a.m. "Please, I made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. Why are you being so unforgiving?" "Because forgiveness requires change, Sophia, and you can't change if you don't think you did anything wrong." "But I didn't text that back. I didn't text anything back. Radio silence was my new best friend." 5:47 a.m. "I love you. I know I don't say it enough, but I do. I love you and I don't want to lose you. Please, let's fix this." And there it was, the final stage. Bargaining disguised as vulnerability. The "I love you" that comes out only when someone realizes they might actually face consequences for their actions. Love is a tool. Love is manipulation. Love is a get-out-of-jail-free card. 6:23 a.m. "Just tell me you're okay. You don't have to come home. Just let me know you're alive." Back to concerned trolling, because when nothing else works, pretend this is about basic human decency rather than control. Mark had settled into his armchair with his orange juice, watching me read through the messages like it was the most entertaining Netflix series he'd seen all year. "So," he said, taking a long sip, "what are you going to text back?" He had that look on his face, the one that said he already knew the answer but wanted to hear me say it. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Thought about all the ways I could respond. Could write a long explanation of why her behavior was unacceptable. Could match her energy and fire back angry texts. Could be mature and suggest counseling. Could write nothing and let the silence speak for itself. All of these were options, and all of them had their merits. But in the end, I went with simplicity. Sometimes the shortest responses cut the deepest, not because they're cruel, but because they're honest in a way that can't be argued with or twisted. I typed out one line, read it over twice to make sure it said exactly what I wanted it to say, and hit send before I could second-guess myself. "Sorry, busy enjoying my freedom." 6 words. That's all it took. 6 words that said everything I needed to say. I'm not coming back. I'm not engaging with your drama. I'm not playing this game anymore. And most importantly, I'm doing better without you than I ever did with you. The beauty of it was in its simplicity, its finality, its complete lack of anger or emotion. It wasn't mean, it wasn't kind, it was just true. I hit send and immediately set my phone to do not disturb. Whatever Sophia sent back, and I knew there would be more, could wait, or it could not wait. It could cease to exist in a digital void for all I cared. For the first time in years, maybe ever, her feelings were not my responsibility to manage. Her crisis was not mine to solve. Her breakdown was not mine to fix. And holy hell did that feel good. Mark started laughing, that genuine belly laugh that comes from witnessing something truly perfect. "Dude," he said, wiping his eyes, "that's cold. That's like Arctic-level cold. I'm actually impressed." He raised his orange juice carton in a toast. To freedom, I guess, and to not putting up with toxic people just because you married them. To freedom, I agreed. And even though I didn't have a drink to toast with, the sentiment landed. I stood up, stretched out my back that was definitely going to make me pay for sleeping on a couch at my age, and looked around Mark's apartment. It wasn't much. A typical bachelor pad with mismatched furniture and a distinct lack of decorative pillows. But it felt more like home than my actual home had in months. Because home isn't just a place, it's a feeling. And I hadn't felt at home in that expensive loft with my wife and her terrible friends in longer than I wanted to admit. My phone was still on the coffee table, face down, definitely vibrating with new messages that I had zero intention of reading. Let Sophia spiral. Let her friends try to piece together what happened. Let the entire social circle dissect my actions and judge me if they wanted. I'd learned something important last night. The opinion of people who would orchestrate your humiliation for entertainment wasn't worth the air it took to voice it. I walked to Mark's window and looked out at the city. Waking up, the sun was just starting to paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. And somewhere out there, coffee shops were opening. People were starting their commutes, and life was happening like it always did. My marriage was over, or at least it was heading that direction fast. And weirdly, I felt lighter than I had in years. Like I'd been carrying around a weight I didn't realize was there until I finally set it down. "So, what's the plan?" Mark asked from behind me. "You going to get a lawyer, find a new place, key her car?" That last one was clearly a joke, but his tone said he'd support me either way. "I'm going to get coffee," I said, turning back to face him with the first genuine smile I'd felt in months. Really good coffee. The expensive kind Sophia always said was a waste of money. And then I'm going to figure out the rest of my life, one decision at a time, without anyone telling me my choices aren't good enough. I grabbed my jacket from where I'd thrown it last night. "You want anything?" "Nah, man, I'm good," Mark said, settling deeper into his chair. "But hey, David, for what it's worth, I think you did the right thing last night. This morning, all of it. That took balls." "Thanks," I said, meaning it. And thanks for the couch, and for not asking too many questions. Anytime, he replied. That's what friends are for. Real friends, not the kind who help orchestrate public humiliations. I left his apartment with my phone still on Do Not Disturb, my coffee fund intact, and my conscience clear. The morning after had turned into the morning of something new. And whatever came next, at least I'd be facing it as myself, not as someone's supporting character. Word spread through Sophia's social circle faster than a celebrity scandal on Twitter. Within a week, I'd become either a legend or a villain, depending on who you asked. And the friend group that had once been so tight-knit was fracturing like cheap glass under pressure. Mark kept me updated on the gossip, partly because he found it hilarious, and partly because he thought I deserved to know my exit had caused a social earthquake. Apparently, half the people at the party thought Sophia's stunt was distasteful at best and psychotic. The other half were trying to defend her while simultaneously distancing themselves from the disaster. Nobody wanted to be associated with the mean girls who'd gotten called out in front of 30 witnesses. Chloe's boyfriend, a guy named Justin I'd met once or twice, actually tracked me down at a coffee shop. "Man," he said, sliding into the seat across from me without invitation, "the way you handled that, legendary. Seriously, my girlfriend's been quiet for days. She keeps asking me if I'd walk out on her. And honestly, after seeing what you dealt with, I'm reconsidering some things." He bought me a coffee and left looking thoughtful, probably running through his own relationship in his head. Jessica's birthday party had become infamous for all the wrong reasons. People weren't talking about the champagne tower or the expensive decorations. They were talking about the husband who called his wife's bluff and walked away without looking back. Some people respected it. Others thought I was cold. But everyone was talking about it, which meant Sophia's carefully curated image was crumbling. The best part? Sophia tried to explain it away as a social experiment to anyone who'd listen. Sure, and my bank account is a charity fund, but the story had already spread too far, and too many people knew the truth. Her friends started canceling brunch plans, Jessica stopped posting pictures with her. Even Isabella, the most loyal of the group, was reportedly keeping her distance. Meanwhile, I was thriving in ways I hadn't expected. New apartment, new routine, new peace. I'd forgotten what it felt like to make decisions without someone correcting them, to exist without being someone's accessory. Sophia had done me a favor. Really, she'd shown me exactly who she was, and I'd finally believed her. 3 months after the party that destroyed my marriage and Sophia's social standing, I was living a life I'd forgotten was possible. New apartment with windows that actually let in sunlight. New haircut that didn't require Sophia's approval. And most importantly, new peace that money genuinely couldn't buy. The kind of peace that comes from not walking on eggshells in your own life. Sophia sent one final email that I almost didn't open. "I miss us." 2 words that would have wrecked me 6 months ago. Now they just made me tired. I replied with 3. "I miss being right." Then I blocked her email address and went back to my coffee. The divorce papers came and went with surprisingly little drama. Turns out, when you've already had your public meltdown at a birthday party, the legal stuff feels like a formality. She kept the apartment and the designer furniture. I kept my sanity and my self-respect. Fair trade, honestly. That's when I met Nora. She was a graphic designer who laughed at inappropriate times and had opinions about everything from politics to pizza toppings. Most importantly, she didn't need an audience to validate her existence. Our first date was coffee and a walk through the park. No performance, no pretense, just 2 people talking like humans instead of Instagram characters. When I told her the story about Sophia's fake breakup prank, she laughed so hard she snorted coffee. "Wait, so basically she held a talent show for narcissists and lost?" she said, wiping tears from her eyes. That's when I knew she got it. She understood that the whole situation wasn't just about a failed prank. It was about people treating relationships like content for their personal reality show. I learned 2 critical things from that entire disaster. Never waste energy arguing with people who are performing for applause. Their opinions aren't about you. They're about maintaining their audience. And second, the best revenge isn't plotting or scheming or getting even. It's building a life so good that your past becomes irrelevant. Sophia staged a breakup for entertainment. I gave her an ending she didn't rehearse, one where the supporting character walked off set and built his own show. Turns out, freedom tastes better than any champagne her friends could have served. And peace? Peace is the real luxury item money can't buy.
My wife staged a breakup to entertain her rich friends at a party while her friends were watching. I didn't argue. I said, "Done. Enjoy your freedom." Their laughter died instantly. So there I was, standing in our overpriced downtown loft on a Friday night, holding a box of imported wine glasses that probably cost more than my college textbooks, wondering how the hell my life had turned into an unpaid internship for my wife's social climbing career. Sophia was buzzing around like a caffeinated hummingbird in designer outfits, barking orders at me like I was some kind of party-planning pack mule. "David, those chairs go by the window, not the wall. Are you even listening to me?" "Yeah, babe, I'm listening. I'm also contemplating whether jumping out said window would be less painful than enduring another one of Jessica's birthday extravaganzas. But sure, let's focus on chair placement." For those of you keeping score at home, this wasn't just any birthday party. Oh no, this was Jessica's 30th birthday bash. And in Sophia's world, that meant it had to be more extra than a Kardashian wedding. We're talking champagne towers, a cheese board that could feed a small European country, and a guest list full of people who wore their net worth like a personality trait. These were the kinds of folks who said things like summer as a verb and thought brunch was a legitimate meal category that required its own dress code. I'd been to 3 of these shindigs in the past year alone, and each time I felt like I was attending a convention for people who peaked in their trust fund years. The thing about being married to Sophia is that you don't just marry the woman, you marry her entire social ecosystem. Her friends weren't just friends, they were like a corporation, complete with hierarchy, performance reviews, and apparently a shared delusion that they were all starring in their own reality show. Jessica was the CEO of this little operation, a trust fund baby who'd never worked a real job, but somehow always had opinions about hustling and grinding. Chloe was the CFO, managing everyone's drama like it was a diversified portfolio. And Isabella, she was the CMO, making sure every brunch, every shopping trip, and every Instagram story was perfectly curated for maximum engagement. As for me, I was basically the janitor, there to clean up messes, move furniture, and stay out of the way when the real players were talking business. "David," Sophia's voice cut through my internal monologue like a knife through butter. "Can you please focus? We have less than 2 hours before people arrive, and you're just standing there like a mannequin at a clearance sale." I wanted to tell her that mannequins at clearance sales actually had more dignity than I did at that moment, but I bit my tongue. Marriage, I'd learned, was less about communication and more about strategic silence. "Pick your battles," my dad always said. "Save your energy for the wars that matter." So I smiled, nodded, and went back to arranging stemware like my life depended on it. About 45 minutes into this decorating hell, Sophia appeared in front of me with that look on her face. You know the one, the look that says, "I'm about to critique you, but I'm going to frame it as helpful so you can't get mad."